Okay, let's get down into the weeds of this. This is Act 1, Scene 5, the key quotes analysis. We need to be learning our quotes. We need to be able to support everything we say about the play, about your poems, with evidence. This is one of the most quote-rich scenes in the play. So the first quote comes from a letter that Macbeth writes to his wife. And crucially, he addresses her as his partner in greatness. Now, first of all, he calls her dearest, which means he loves her. So the intimacy of their relationship is important. Then he calls her his partner, which would be very unusual. What we're seeing here in this play is a patriarchal society. In other words, a society in which men dominate. Women aren't seen as equals or partners. But for Macbeth, he has this respect for his wife, this regard for his wife, that he regards her as a partner. And then, crucially, there's that reference to greatness. Now, you might remember that in Act 1, Scene 3, Macbeth, commenting on the witch's prophecies, said, "The greatest is behind." For Macbeth, greatness is the crown, is the idea of him being king. So when he says, "my dearest partner in greatness," there's a suggestion. We can't say it for sure, but it's certainly there. It certainly adds spice and interest to the opening act of the play. There's a suggestion that these people have already discussed the idea of Macbeth becoming king, that they already know what they would have to do in order for him to become king, that the witches haven't put the idea of regicide in his head. They haven't made him ambitious. That ambition was already there. His desire for power, his understanding of what it's going to take to achieve that desire was already there. And he has shared that with his wife. Lady Macbeth, she just thinks it's a great idea. Yeah, let's go kill the king. But she's worried that her husband his nature is too full of the milk of human kindness. Now, the milk of human kindness is a metaphor. Apologies, by the way, I'm not sure whether the microphone is picking up the sound, but the kids next door, great kids, they're playing on the trampoline and there's a lot of noise. So hopefully it's not too distracting if you can hear it. She worries that her husband has a conscience, and that conscience will stop him from doing what he needs to do to become king. Now, this is evidence of her corruption, her moral depravity. She sees conscience as a problem, not as a strength. Conscience is, of course, a strength that stops us doing things we shouldn't do. But she sees her role as giving him the strength to overcome that conscience. And she sees that as an act of love, which is indicative of how twisted her worldview is, but also is a very unusual way to think. And of course, that makes her a much more interesting character. When she says, "Hie thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear," that phrase, "hie thee hither," that alliterative phrase, it's deliberately designed by Shakespeare to echo the witches. She sounds like one of the witches. And when she says this image of pouring spirits in his ear, it brings up ideas of witchcraft, of spell making. So there's an association of her. We know they're wicked, and the language there associates her with that kind of wicked corruption. But of course, it's important that you understand that Lady Macbeth is not a supernatural character. What she is a very strong and confident woman, and she understands that she has power, and her power is in her words. And I like her there. I'm sorry, I shouldn't maybe. But I like the fact that she understands that she is able to empower herself and empower her husband through her words. What she's essentially saying is she knows how he ticks. She knows how he thinks. She knows what he wants. And she knows what to say to get him what he wants. And she thinks that once he gets it, he'll be happy. That's her big mistake. Her big speech in this scene. Now there's an aircraft because the Bray Air Show is on and they're all flying into Baldonnel, which is near where I live. Again, apologies about the noise. The the big speech that you will learn. I know you'll learn it. And I'm not going to put it in yellow here because it's a big one. But maybe it's a bit big for the start of the year. But it's a magnificent speech. When she learns that Duncan is coming to her castle, she says, the raven. I'm going to mark a couple of things here. She says, the raven himself. Sorry, no. God damn it. There we go. The raven himself is hoarse, that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. And then she talks to the evil that she understands pervades the world. And she says, come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, topful of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood. And then the most important part, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake. And I am going to mark this one in yellow, my fell purpose. It's one of the great speeches by Shakespeare. I love the fact that he gives it to Lady Macbeth here. It's haunting, it's troubling, it's, presenting just how corrupt a person can be, but it's brilliantly evocative. Look at the last three words, my fell purpose. See that word fell? To an Elizabethan audience, that word means evil. Her purpose is to help her husband kill the king so that he can seize the crown. She knows that that is evil, but she shows no hesitation. She's going to do it. In fact, she calls for the spirits of evil in the world to help her suppress her conscience. When she talks about the access and passage to remorse, that's your conscience. Remorse is guilt. The way you feel guilt is through your conscience. She wants to stop up the access to remorse. She wants to switch off her conscience. Her biggest mistake is believing that that's something she can do. But she knows that if she's going to help her husband do what they both want to do, she cannot listen to her conscience. So she's talking about, metaphorically, putting her fingers in her ears and not listening to that voice which is screaming at her, don't do this. I love how in the opening of this speech, she refers to the raven, which anybody in Shakespeare's audience would have recognised as a symbol of death. Because the raven was associated with the Tower of London, which was a place of execution. I love the haunting use of croaks, the onomatopoeia, the sound of the ravens croak, creating this haunting atmosphere. I love the fact that she says, if he enters this castle, he's dead. I love the fact that she's so dynamic and so determined. And yeah, she's disturbing. And yeah, she's troubling. And yeah, we don't admire her, but we admire Shakespeare's capacity to create such a believable and such a brilliantly mesmeric character. And when her husband, when he arrives and he's nervous about what they're planning to do, she tells him, and again, one of the greatest quotes from the play, she tells him, look, we're going to do this. I know it's wrong. And using a brilliant biblical allusion, that's a reference to the Bible, where the serpent is the personification of evil. In Genesis, in the story of Adam and Eve and the fall, she says, when he arrives, put on your happy face, look like the innocent flower, welcome him, hug him, make him feel secure, but never forget what we're going to do. Be the serpent under it. It's a great example of imagery. It's a great example of nature imagery, of juxtaposition or deliberate contrast. And it gives us a really powerful insight into this woman's corrupt and wicked nature. She certainly appears to be utterly corrupt. What Shakespeare does really well later in the play is show us that actually she doesn't eliminate her conscience. She merely ignores it. But conscience comes back to haunt her later on in the play. So that's your introduction to Lady Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 5.